Some moments break your heart in ways you never forget. For Dennis, a struggling single father working as a school janitor, that moment came when he found a little girl sitting alone in an empty classroom with an unopened lunchbox. When she finally showed him what was inside, his hands began to shake. There was nothing there except a crumpled napkin and a note that read, "Don't be mad, Mama tried. She said food is for tomorrow." Those words hit him like a punch to the chest. What could one father barely making ends meet do for a child who wasn't even his own? And what would he discover when he learned the truth behind that empty lunchbox? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Dennis Holbrook's alarm clock went off at 4:30 every morning, a sound that had become as familiar as his own heartbeat. He'd reach over in the darkness, silence it with a practiced hand, and lie there for just a moment, listening to the quiet breathing of his son asleep in the next room. Those few seconds of stillness were his, a brief pause before the day's demands began pulling at him from every direction. The apartment was small, just 2 bedrooms on the 3rd floor of a building that had seen better decades. The carpet was worn thin in the hallways, and the radiator clanked and hissed through winter nights, but it was clean and it was theirs. That mattered more than Dennis could put into words. After everything they'd been through, having a place to call home, even a modest one, felt like an achievement worth protecting. He'd swing his legs out of bed, feet finding the cold floor, and pad quietly to the kitchen. The coffee maker was older than his son, a wedding gift from a lifetime ago, but it still worked. While it gurgled and steamed, Dennis would pack 2 lunches with the careful precision of someone who understood that every dollar had to stretch. A sandwich for himself, usually peanut butter or whatever deli meat was on sale. For his boy, he tried to do better, turkey and cheese. An apple, a juice box, sometimes a granola bar if the budget allowed. His son's name was Caleb, and he was 7 years old, bright-eyed, curious, with a smile that could light up a room when he chose to share it. He looked so much like his mother that sometimes Dennis had to look away, the resemblance a sweet ache in his chest that never quite faded. 3 years had passed since Laura died. 3 years of learning how to be both parents at once. And Dennis still wasn't sure he was getting it right. Laura had been the dreamer between them, the one who saw possibilities where Dennis saw only obstacles. She'd believed in big plans, in saving for the future, in building something lasting. When she got sick, cancer, aggressive and merciless, those plans had crumbled like sand castles at high tide. The medical bills came first, then the missed work, then the hard decisions about what to keep and what to let go. Dennis had been working construction then. Good money when the weather cooperated and the projects were steady. But you can't work on a roof when you're spending every spare moment in hospital rooms, holding your wife's hand and pretending everything will be okay. After Laura passed, Dennis had faced a choice. He could keep chasing construction jobs, higher pay, but unpredictable hours. Or he could find something stable, something that would let him be there when Caleb needed him. The janitor position at Riverside Elementary paid less, considerably less, but the hours were predictable and it came with benefits. Most importantly, it meant working at the same school Caleb attended. He could walk his son to class every morning, see him in the hallways, be close if anything went wrong. So Dennis had swallowed his pride, traded his tool belt for a mop and bucket, and became invisible. That's what janitors were in most people's eyes. Part of the infrastructure, noticed only when something wasn't clean enough. He'd watched parents brush past him in the hallways without a glance, heard teachers discuss their weekends as if he wasn't standing right there emptying their trash bins. It stung sometimes, that casual dismissal, but Dennis reminded himself why he was doing it. For Caleb, everything was for Caleb. Their morning routine was choreographed through repetition. Dennis would wake his son at 6, give him time to shake off sleep before gently coaxing him toward the bathroom. Caleb was not a morning person. That came from Laura's side. and he'd shuffle through the apartment like a small, grumpy ghost until breakfast worked its magic. Dennis kept it simple: cereal or oatmeal, orange juice, a multivitamin shaped like a cartoon character. They'd eat together at the small kitchen table, and Dennis would ask about homework or plans for recess, anything to get Caleb talking. The boy understood their situation better than any 7-year-old should. He never asked for the expensive sneakers other kids wore, or complained when they had pasta 3 nights in a row. When his classmates talked about vacations to Disney World or new video game systems, Caleb would listen quietly and then come home and tell his father about the interesting bug he'd found at recess instead. It broke Dennis's heart, that careful consideration, that premature wisdom. "Dad?" Caleb had asked one morning, maybe 6 months into the janitor job. "Why do you clean at my school?" Dennis had paused, coffee cup halfway to his lips. "Because it's honest work, buddy. Somebody's got to do it. But you used to build houses." "I did. And maybe someday I will again. But right now, this job lets me be close to you. That's worth more than any house." Caleb had nodded, processing this with his characteristic seriousness. "Okay, I like that you're there." Those 4 words had made every dismissive glance, every time someone talked over him like he wasn't there, worth it. Dennis would walk Caleb to school every morning, even though it was barely 2 blocks from their apartment. Those 10 minutes were precious, just the 2 of them moving through the early morning quiet. They'd talk about nothing important, whether it might rain, what Mrs. Brennan might teach in math class, whether the cafeteria would serve the good pizza or the kind that tasted like cardboard. Small things, but they mattered. At the school entrance, Dennis would crouch down, his knees protesting slightly, construction work leaving its mark even now, and check Caleb's backpack. Make sure his lunch was secure, remind him to pay attention in class. "I know, Dad," Caleb would say, but he'd be smiling, just making sure. "Have a good day, okay?" "You too." Then Caleb would head inside, backpack bouncing, and Dennis would watch until he disappeared into the flow of students. Only then would Dennis circle around to the staff entrance, clock in, and begin his workday. Riverside Elementary was an older building, brick and tile, that had educated generations of children. It served a mixed population, some families with money, their kids dropped off in newer cars, wearing clothes that still had that store-fresh stiffness. Others came from circumstances more like Dennis's own, lunch accounts that sometimes ran dry, jackets that got handed down until they were more patch than original fabric. Dennis noticed things. It was part of being invisible. You saw what people revealed when they thought no one was watching. He saw which teachers stayed late to help struggling students, which ones checked out the moment the bell rang. He saw kids who waited in the office until 6 because their parents worked evening shifts. He saw backpacks that were practically empty and others stuffed so full the zippers strained, but he kept his head down. That was the unspoken rule of his position. Observe, clean, stay out of the way. He wasn't there to solve problems or get involved in student affairs. He was there to keep the floors clean, the bathrooms stocked, the trash emptied. So that's what he did. His supervisor was an older man named Floyd, who'd been at Riverside for nearly 20 years. Floyd had shown Dennis the ropes with patient efficiency, teaching him the best way to strip and wax floors, which cleaning solutions worked on which surfaces, whether supply closets were stocked, and how to submit requisition forms when supplies ran low. "Keep to yourself," Floyd had advised early on. "Folks don't mean to be rude, they just don't think about us much." "Don't take it personal," Dennis had nodded, understanding the wisdom in that advice, even if it sometimes hurt to follow it. The principal was a woman named Diane Sheffield, mid-50s, with silver-streaked hair and the perpetually tired eyes of someone managing too many demands with too few resources. She was fair, from what Dennis observed, and genuinely seemed to care about the students. She'd nod to him in the hallways, sometimes even say good morning. That small acknowledgement meant more than she probably realized. Dennis's shifts followed a predictable pattern. Morning duties: check bathrooms, empty classroom trash before students arrived, make sure the cafeteria was set up for breakfast service. During school hours, respond to spills and messes, restock paper towels and soap, handle maintenance requests. Afternoon and evening, deep cleaning classrooms, mopping hallways, securing the building before heading home. He worked efficiently, taking pride in doing his job well, even if no one particularly noticed. There was a satisfaction in transforming a messy classroom into an orderly space, in making sure every surface was sanitized and safe for the kids who'd use it tomorrow. It wasn't building houses, but it was building something, a clean, functional environment where children could learn. It was a Thursday afternoon in late October when everything changed. Rain had been falling steadily since morning, the kind of persistent drizzle that made the hallways slick and left muddy footprints everywhere Dennis had just mopped. The lunch period had ended 20 minutes ago, and the cafeteria was his next stop. But as he pushed his cleaning cart past the third-grade classrooms, he noticed something unusual. One classroom still had its lights on. Dennis paused, frowning. The teachers were meticulous about turning off lights when they took their students to recess. Budget cuts meant everyone was conscious of electricity usage. He peered through the narrow window in the door and saw her. A little girl sat alone at a desk in the middle of the empty room. She was small, even for a third grader, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail that had seen better days. Her clothes were clean but worn, the kind of faded that came from too many washings. In front of her sat a bright pink lunchbox, unopened, its cheerful color somehow making the scene sadder. Dennis's first instinct was to keep walking. Not his business, not his place. He was the janitor, not a teacher or counselor. Floyd's advice echoed in his mind. Keep to yourself, don't get involved, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the way the girl sat so still, staring at that lunchbox like it was a puzzle she couldn't solve. Maybe it was the slump of her small shoulders, the defeated posture that looked wrong on someone so young. Or maybe it was just that he was a father, and some instincts ran deeper than job descriptions. He knocked gently on the doorframe, pushing it open a few inches. "Hey there, you feeling okay?" The girl's head snapped up, eyes wide and startled. For a moment she looked like she might bolt, but then her shoulders sagged again, and she just nodded, not quite meeting his gaze. "Shouldn't you be at recess?" Dennis asked, keeping his voice soft, unthreatening. He stayed in the doorway, not wanting to crowd her. "I don't feel like playing today," she said quietly. Dennis nodded slowly. "That's fair. Sometimes we all need a break from people." He gestured toward the lunchbox. "You planning to eat that? Lunch period's over, but you've still got time before class starts up again." The girl's eyes dropped to the lunchbox. Her hands, small and pale, reached toward it, then hesitated. Dennis saw her throat work as she swallowed hard. "What's your name?" he asked. "Penny," she whispered. "I'm Mr. Holbrook. I work here, keep the place clean." He paused, then added, "My son goes to school here too. He's in second grade." Something in her posture relaxed slightly at that. "Which one?" Caleb Holbrook. I don't know him. Well, he's younger than you. Different recess time, probably." Dennis shifted his weight, the mop handle still in his hand. "Penny, are you going to eat your lunch? You must be hungry." Her hands moved to the lunchbox again, fingers fumbling with the clasp. It took her 3 tries to get it open, and Dennis noticed her hands were shaking. When the lid finally popped up, she stared inside for a long moment, then looked up at him with eyes that held too much understanding for someone her age. "There's nothing in it," she said simply, and turned the lunchbox toward him. Dennis stepped closer, his heart already sinking before he even looked. Inside was nothing but a crumpled paper napkin and a small piece of paper covered in careful, childish handwriting. He picked up the note with hands that had started to shake. "Don't be mad," Mama tried. "She said food is for tomorrow." The words hit him like a physical blow. He read them twice, 3 times, trying to process what they meant, what they said about this little girl's life. When he looked up, Penny was watching him with a strange mixture of embarrassment and resignation. "It's okay," she said quickly. "It happens sometimes. Mama's having a hard week." Dennis had to swallow hard before he could speak. "How often is sometimes?" She shrugged, a gesture that tried for casual but didn't quite make it. I don't know. Maybe once or twice a week. Sometimes more if it's near the end of the month. Near the end of the month. When money ran out. When food stamps didn't stretch far enough. When you had to choose between feeding your kids today or making sure the lights stayed on. Dennis knew that math intimately. The difference was, he always managed to put something in Caleb's lunchbox, even if it meant he went without. "Do you have a little brother or sister?" he asked, the note still in his hand. "My baby brother. His name is Timothy. He's 2. She said it with the pride of an older sibling, then added more quietly, "Mama has to feed him first. He's little." Of course. Of course she did. And this girl, this small, understanding girl, sat here alone, rather than let anyone see her empty lunchbox, rather than go to the cafeteria where someone might ask questions. She'd learned to be invisible with her hunger. Dennis made a decision. "I packed my lunch today. Brought more than I can eat, actually. You'd be doing me a favor if you'd help me out with it." Penny's eyes widened. "Really? Really?" He reached into the canvas bag he kept on the bottom shelf of his cleaning cart and pulled out his lunch. The sandwich was nothing special, turkey and cheese on wheat bread, but he'd also packed an apple and a small bag of pretzels. He set them on the desk beside her. "Go ahead." She stared at the food like it was a feast, then looked up at him with something close to wonder. "Are you sure?" "Positive. Can't let good food go to waste." Her hands moved tentatively, then with increasing speed as hunger overcame hesitation. She ate quickly, carefully, trying not to seem too desperate even though Dennis could see she was ravenous. He pulled out the chair at the teacher's desk and sat down, giving her space, trying to make this seem normal and not like the heartbreaking thing it actually was. "Your mama works a lot?" he asked quietly. Penny nodded, mouth full. She swallowed and said, "2 jobs. Sometimes she works at night too. She's really tired all the time. I bet she is." Dennis thought about his own exhaustion, and he only had 1 job. "What about your dad?" Her face closed off. "He doesn't live with us." The way she said it told Dennis everything he needed to know. Another single mother, another family teetering on the edge, another child learning too young that the world wasn't always kind or fair. The bell rang, signaling the end of recess. Penny quickly finished the last of the sandwich and brushed crumbs from her shirt. "Thank you," she said, looking directly at him for the first time. "Thank you so much, Mr. Holbrook." "You're welcome, Penny." She grabbed her empty lunchbox and backpack, then paused at the door. "Please don't tell anyone. Mama would be really embarrassed." "I won't," Dennis promised, though the words felt like a lie. How could he not tell anyone? How could he just let this continue? But Penny was already gone, hurrying to join the stream of students flowing back into the building. Dennis sat there in the empty classroom, the crumpled note still in his hand, and felt something crack open in his chest. It wasn't pity. Pity was useless, condescending. It was recognition. He saw his own struggle reflected in this child, saw what could have been Caleb if Dennis had been less careful, less fortunate, if the edges of their life had frayed just a little bit more. That evening, after Caleb was in bed, Dennis sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea he didn't drink. The note was on the table in front of him, smoothed out but still wrinkled. "Don't be mad, Mama tried." What kind of child had to write that? What kind of mother had to read it? He thought about Penny's careful dignity, the way she'd tried to hide her hunger, her immediate concern for her mother's feelings. He thought about her baby brother, about a woman working herself to exhaustion, about the invisible families all around him struggling in silence, and he thought about what he could do, what he should do, knowing that whatever choice he made would change things. Some doors, once opened, couldn't be closed again. The next morning, Dennis packed 3 lunches instead of 2. He moved through the familiar routine with extra care, making sure each sandwich had enough filling, adding an extra granola bar to the 3rd bag, including one of the good juice boxes he usually saved for Caleb's special occasions. Caleb watched from the kitchen doorway, still sleepy, his hair sticking up at odd angles. "Who's that one for?" Dennis had known this question was coming. He'd spent half the night figuring out how to explain it. "There's a student at school who sometimes doesn't have enough lunch. I thought I'd help out." "Oh." Caleb processed this with his characteristic seriousness, then shuffled over to the pantry. He dug around for a moment and emerged with his favorite granola bar, the kind with chocolate chips that cost more than the regular ones. "Can we put this in too?" Something warm expanded in Dennis's chest. "You sure? That's your favorite." "Yeah, but—" Caleb shrugged, suddenly shy. "If they are hungry, they should have something good." Dennis pulled his son into a hug, this small boy with such a big heart. "Your mama would be so proud of you." "She'd be proud of you too, Dad." They walked to school together as always, but Dennis carried an extra weight that morning. Not physical, but emotional. The responsibility of what he was about to do, the commitment he was making. This wasn't a one-time thing, he realized. Once you started seeing someone, really seeing them, you couldn't unsee them. You couldn't walk away. At the staff entrance, Floyd was already there, setting up his cart for the day. "Morning, Dennis. Morning. You look like you didn't sleep much." Dennis managed a tired smile. "Just thinking about things." Floyd studied him with the knowing eyes of someone who'd lived long enough to recognize trouble. "Thinking's dangerous business sometimes, but necessary." He clapped Dennis on the shoulder. "Whatever it is, you'll figure it out." The morning passed in its usual rhythm. Dennis cleaned bathrooms, emptied trash, responded to a spill in the kindergarten hallway. But he found himself watching the clock more than usual, counting down the minutes until lunch period. When it finally arrived, he made his way to the third-grade hallway, the extra lunch tucked in his cleaning cart beneath a stack of paper towels. He approached Penny's classroom casually, not wanting to draw attention. Through the door's window, he could see her sitting at her desk while her classmates filed out to the cafeteria. Her bright pink lunchbox sat in front of her, but she wasn't opening it. She was just staring at it with that same defeated posture from yesterday. Dennis knocked gently and entered. Penny looked up, and he saw surprise flicker across her face, followed by something that might have been hope. "Hey, Penny. Thought I'd check on you." "Nay," he kept his voice casual, friendly. "How's your day going?" "Okay," she said quietly. "You eating lunch today?" She looked down at the lunchbox, then back at him. Her silence was answer enough. Dennis pulled the brown paper bag from his cart. "Well, this is lucky timing. I packed way too much again. My son keeps telling me I overdo it." He set the bag on her desk. "Would you help me out?" The relief on her face nearly broke his heart. "Really? Again? Really? Can't have good food going to waste." He pulled out the teacher's chair and sat down, trying to normalize this, to make it feel less like charity. "Besides, it's nice to have company while I take my break." Penny opened the bag with careful hands, her eyes widening at the contents. "There's so much. Growing kids need to eat." He watched as she pulled out the sandwich, the apple, the granola bar, with chocolate chips. "My son picked that one special. Said whoever got it should have something good." Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back quickly. "That's really nice of him. He's a good kid. Sometimes I wonder if he's teaching me more than I'm teaching him." Penny started eating, slower than yesterday, savoring it. Between bites, she talked. Dennis learned that she loved reading, but didn't have books at home. That her teacher, Mrs. Brennan, was kind, but had 30 students and couldn't pay special attention to anyone. That recess was complicated because the other kids sometimes noticed things. Her worn shoes, the way she wore the same 3 outfits. In rotation, how she never had birthday party invitations to hand out. "I have one friend," Penny said. "Her name is Zoe. She doesn't care about that stuff." "Good friends are worth more than a whole crowd of people who only care about surfaces," Dennis said. "Sounds like Zoe's smart." "She is. She shares her snacks. With me sometimes, but her mum packed them for her, so I don't want to take too much." The casual way she said it, the awareness that she was taking from someone else's portion, the guilt even while hungry, it reinforced what Dennis had already begun to understand. This wasn't occasional hardship. This was Penny's daily reality, navigated with more grace than most adults could manage. "Your mama," Dennis ventured carefully, "she working today?" "She works every day. She cleans offices at night, and during the day she works at a store. Sometimes she picks up extra shifts on weekends. Penny took a small bite of apple. She tries really hard. It's not her fault. I'm sure she does, and I'm sure she's doing her best. Dennis leaned forward slightly. You know, Penny, if things are tight at home, there are programs at school that can help. Free lunch, things like that. Penny's face closed off immediately. Mama says we don't take handouts. She says we handle our own problems. Pride. Dennis understood it intimately. It was the same pride that had almost kept him from accepting Laura's parents' help after she died. The same pride that sometimes made him skip meals rather than let Caleb see how thin their resources were stretched. Pride kept your dignity intact, but sometimes it also kept you from accepting the help you desperately needed. That's not a handout, Dennis said gently. Those programs exist because people understand that sometimes good families need a little support. Your mama paying taxes? I bet she is. That means she's already paid into the system. Using it isn't taking. It's just accepting what she's already contributed to. Penny looked uncertain. I don't think she'd see it that way. Maybe not, but you could mention it. Just plant the seed, see what she says. They sat in comfortable silence while Penny finished eating. When she was done, she carefully folded the paper bag and tucked it into her backpack, probably to reuse, Dennis realized. Every small thing had value when you had so little. Mr. Holbrook, Penny's voice was small, why are you being so nice to me? The question hung in the air between them. Dennis took a moment before answering, wanting to get it right. Because you matter, Penny. Because every kid deserves to eat lunch and not worry about it. And because, he paused, surprised by the emotion in his own voice, because when I look at you, I see someone who's brave and kind and trying really hard. And I think someone should see that. Someone should acknowledge it. Penny's eyes welled up again, but this time she didn't blink the tears away. One rolled down her cheek and she wiped it quickly with her sleeve. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for seeing me. The words hit Dennis harder than he expected. Thank you for seeing me. As if being visible was a gift, as if being noticed was something rare and precious. And maybe, for kids like Penny, it was. The bell rang, signaling the end of lunch. Penny gathered her things quickly, the empty pink lunchbox no longer a source of shame, but simply carried along with her backpack. At the door, she turned back. Will you? She hesitated. Will you be here tomorrow? I work every day, Dennis said, and I always pack more than I need. Her smile, small and tentative but genuine, was worth every penny he'd have to cut from his own budget to make this work. After she left, Dennis sat alone in the classroom, the weight of his decision settling over him. This was just the beginning, he knew that. One lunch wouldn't solve Penny's problems, wouldn't change her mother's circumstances, wouldn't fix a system that left families like hers falling through the cracks. But maybe it didn't have to solve everything. Maybe sometimes the small acts mattered most, not because they fixed the world, but because they reminded one person that they weren't alone in it. Dennis stood, collected his things, and went back to work. But something had shifted. He wasn't just a janitor going through the motions anymore. He had purpose beyond his paycheck, beyond even his responsibility to Caleb. He had someone who needed him to show up. 2 weeks passed, and the lunchtime meetings became routine. Dennis would find Penny in her classroom, not every day but most days, and they'd share a meal and conversation. She began waiting for him, no longer hiding in the back of the room, but sitting near the door where she could see him coming. The change was subtle, but significant. She was allowing herself to expect kindness instead of bracing for disappointment. On a particularly cold Tuesday, Penny arrived at their usual spot with something clutched in her hand. Her face was bright with pride, an expression Dennis hadn't seen before. "Mr. Holbrook, look!" She thrust a piece of paper toward him, a spelling test with a perfect score marked in red at the top. 100%, every single word correct. "Penny, this is amazing!" Dennis examined the test with genuine admiration. The words weren't easy ones either, vocabulary beyond what he'd expect for 3rd grade. "You must have studied hard for this." "I did. I love spelling and reading." Her enthusiasm bubbled over, making her seem younger, more like the child she should have been. "Mrs. Brennan says I read at a 5th grade level. That's incredible. You must read a lot." The brightness dimmed slightly. "I stay in the library after school as long as they let me. Mrs. Chen, the librarian, she's really nice. She lets me sit in the corner and read until the janitors have to lock up." She paused, then added quietly, "We don't have books at home." Dennis thought about the small bookshelf in Caleb's room, books accumulated over years from birthday gifts and library sales. They weren't expensive volumes, but they were there, always available. He'd never considered what it would be like to love reading but have no access to books outside of school. "What kind of books do you like?" he asked. Penny's face lit up again. "Everything, but I really like stories about animals and adventures. Stories where kids solve mysteries or go on quests." She looked down at her spelling test, tracing the perfect score with one finger. "Sometimes when I read, I can be somewhere else for a while. Somewhere better." The simple honesty of it, the escape that books provided from a reality too hard for young shoulders, made Dennis's chest tight. "I'll tell you what, my son has some books he's outgrown. Would you like to have them?" Penny's eyes went wide. "Really? I could keep them?" "Absolutely. They're just sitting on his shelf, and books should be read, not collecting dust." "That would be—" Her voice caught. "That would be the best thing ever." That evening, Dennis and Caleb went through the bookshelf together. Caleb understood immediately what they were doing, and approached it with his characteristic generosity. "She can have all of these," he said, pulling out a stack of early readers. "And this one, this was my favorite when I was little." He held up a worn copy of a book about a lost dog finding its way home. "You sure?" Dennis asked. "That one's special to you. That's why she should have it. The best books should go to people who really need them." Caleb added it to the growing pile. "Dad, is she okay? The girl you're helping?" Dennis chose his words carefully. "She's dealing with some tough things. Her family doesn't have a lot of money, and her mama works really hard, but it's not always enough." "Like us after Mom died?" "Similar, maybe a bit harder." Caleb nodded, processing. "I'm glad you're helping her. Mom always said we should help people when we can." "She did say that." Dennis pulled his son close. "You're a good kid, you know that?" "I learned from you, Dad." The next day, Dennis brought the books in a canvas bag, keeping them hidden under his cleaning supplies. When he met Penny for lunch, he set the bag beside her desk without ceremony. "Go ahead and look." Penny opened the bag and gasped. There were at least 15 books inside, a mix of picture books and early chapter books, all in good condition. She pulled them out one by one, handling each like it was made of glass. "This is too much," she whispered. "It's exactly right," Dennis countered. My son insisted. "He wanted you to have them." She clutched one of the books to her chest, and tears spilled down her cheeks. "I've never had my own books before. Never." Dennis let her cry, understanding that sometimes tears weren't about sadness, but about relief, about feeling seen and valued. When she'd composed herself, she looked up at him with fierce determination. "I'm going to take such good care of these. I'll read them over and over, and maybe someday, when I'm grown up and have money, I'll buy books for kids who need them too." I think that's a beautiful plan. They fell into their lunch routine, Penny eating the sandwich Dennis had brought while she told him about the books she was planning to read first. But as the weeks progressed, Dennis began noticing other things. Penny's shoes had a hole in the side that she tried to hide by positioning her foot carefully. Her jacket, when the weather turned colder, was thin and worn, clearly not warm enough for the dropping temperatures. She never mentioned these things, never complained, but Dennis saw them. The financial reality of helping Penny was beginning to show in his own life. The extra groceries each week, even buying the cheapest options, added up. Dennis found himself skipping lunch more often, telling himself he wasn't that hungry anyway. He'd take smaller portions at dinner, claiming he'd eaten a big lunch at work. But Caleb was perceptive, more than Dennis sometimes gave him credit for. "Dad, how come you're not eating much anymore?" Caleb asked one evening, watching Dennis push food around his plate. "Just not as hungry these days. Getting older, don't need as much fuel. Caleb's expression said he didn't believe that for a second. Is it because you're giving your lunch to that girl? Dennis sighed. There was no point in lying to him. Partly, but it's okay, buddy. I'm fine. Mom wouldn't want you to stop eating to help someone else. Caleb's voice was serious, older than his years. She'd want us to help, but not hurt ourselves doing it. The wisdom in those words stopped Dennis cold. Laura would have said exactly that. Help where you can, but don't set yourself on fire to keep others warm. It was a balance he'd been struggling to find. You're right, Dennis admitted. I need to be smarter about this. Maybe there are other ways to help besides just giving her my lunch every day. What about talking to the school? You said there are programs. Penny says her mama won't accept that kind of help. Too proud? Then maybe you need to talk to her mama, Caleb suggested. Like actually talk to her. Explain that it's not charity, it's just people helping people. Dennis had been avoiding that thought, knowing it was the right path but scared of what it might mean. Approaching Penny's mother felt like crossing a line, intruding into private family business. But Caleb was right. If he wanted to really help, half measures wouldn't be enough. That Friday, Dennis asked Penny a careful question. Would your mama be upset if I talked to her? I'd like to let her know that I've been helping you with lunch. Fear flashed across Penny's face. She'd be so embarrassed. She'd feel like she's failing. She's not failing. She's surviving impossible circumstances. There's a big difference. Dennis kept his voice gentle. But I think she should know. And maybe, together, we could figure out better solutions. Would you ask her if she'd be willing to meet with me? Penny looked torn, but finally nodded. I'll ask. But please, please don't make her feel bad. She's trying so hard. I promise. I just want to help, that's all. Over the weekend, Dennis thought about what he'd say, how he'd approach a conversation with a woman he'd never met about her family's private struggles. It felt presumptuous and necessary in equal measure. He couldn't keep providing meals indefinitely without addressing the larger issue, but he also couldn't just walk away from Penny now that he'd begun to help. Monday morning, Penny found him during his rounds. She said okay, she told him quietly, but she's scared and proud. And she works a lot, so it has to be after her day shift ends, which is 6:30. That works for me, Dennis said. Where should we meet? Could you maybe come to our apartment? She doesn't want to meet at school where people might see. Dennis understood. Pride was like that. It needed privacy to bend. Just tell me when and where. Penny gave him an address on the south side of town, in a neighborhood Dennis knew by reputation as struggling, but safe. They set a time for Wednesday evening. As Penny walked away, Dennis felt the weight of what was coming settle over him. This conversation would change things one way or another. He just hoped it would be for the better. Winter was settling in properly now, November bringing earlier darkness and the kind of cold that worked its way through inadequate jackets and into bones. Dennis noticed Penny shivering more, saw how she'd wrap her arms around herself between classes, how her lips sometimes had a bluish tint when she arrived at school in the morning. The day before his scheduled meeting with Penny's mother, she brought him something that made his throat tighten. It was a handmade card, construction paper folded in half, decorated with drawings of flowers in colored pencil. The flowers were surprisingly good, carefully detailed, showing real artistic talent. Inside, in neat printing that showed how much effort she'd put into making it perfect, were 5 words that would stay with Dennis for the rest of his life. Thank you for seeing me. He read the words twice, 3 times, feeling their weight. Not thank you for the food or thank you for helping. Thank you for seeing me. As if visibility itself was the gift. As if being noticed, truly noticed, was more valuable than any sandwich or book. Penny, this is beautiful, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I wanted you to know. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Before you, I felt like I was invisible. Like I was there, but nobody really saw me. The other kids, they look at my clothes or my shoes, and then they look away. Teachers have so many students that I'm just another name on the list. But you see me, the real me. Not just the poor kid with no lunch. Dennis had to set the card down carefully because his hands had started shaking. He thought about all the times he'd felt invisible himself, mopping floors while people talked over him, Cleaning bathrooms no one thanked him for maintaining, existing in the margins of other people's lives. He understood exactly what she meant. "I see you," he said quietly. "I see someone smart and brave and kind, someone who loves her baby brother and worries about her mama, someone who gets perfect scores on spelling tests and reads fifth-grade books. I see all of that, Penny, and I'm honored that you trust me enough to let me." She wiped at her eyes quickly. "I should get to class." "Wait," Dennis pulled out his lunch bag. Along with the usual sandwich, he'd added an extra apple and a packet of crackers. "Take this for after school, in case you get hungry before dinner." She accepted it with a grateful nod and hurried away. Dennis tucked the card carefully into his pocket, a tangible reminder of why this mattered, why he couldn't walk away even when it got complicated. That evening over dinner, Caleb noticed Dennis's distracted mood. "You nervous about tomorrow?" "A little," Dennis admitted. "I'm about to walk into a stranger's home and talk about their private struggles. That's not easy territory. What if she gets mad?" "Then she gets mad. At least I tried." Dennis pushed rice around his plate. "The worst thing would be doing nothing and watching Penny keep struggling when there might be ways to help. You're doing the right thing." "Dad," Caleb said it with such certainty, such faith in his father, that Dennis felt the pressure of living up to that trust. Wednesday evening arrived too quickly and too slowly all at once. Dennis left work at his usual time, drove home to pick up Caleb. He wasn't leaving his son alone for this, and besides, having Caleb there might help ease tensions, and headed across town to the address Penny had given him. The neighborhood was exactly what Dennis expected. Older apartment buildings that had seen better days, but maintained well enough. Kids played in a small courtyard despite the cold, their laughter carrying on the evening air. Laundry hung from some balconies. Cars in the parking lot ranged from barely running to moderately reliable. It was the geography of getting by, of families doing their best with what they had. Penny's apartment was on the second floor of a 4-story building. Dennis climbed the exterior stairs, Caleb's hand in his, and knocked on the door marked 2C. His heart was hammering harder than the situation warranted, but something about this felt momentous, like he was standing at the edge of something that would change multiple lives. The door opened, and Dennis got his first look at Penny's mother. She was younger than he'd expected, probably early 30s, with the same dark hair as her daughter, but pulled back in a hasty ponytail. Her face showed the kind of exhaustion that went bone deep, the wear of too many hours worked and too little sleep. She wore retail store uniform pants and a simple shirt, her name tag still pinned to her chest. "Brenda, Mr. Holbrook." Her voice was wary, defensive already. "Please call me Dennis. This is my son, Caleb." Brenda's expression softened slightly at the sight of Caleb, then she stepped back to let them in. "Come in. Penny's in the back with Timothy." The apartment was small, maybe 600 square feet total, but it was immaculately clean. Everything had a place, everything was organized. A small couch faced an older television. The kitchen area was spotless, dishes already done and put away. Children's toys were contained in a plastic bin in the corner. It was the home of someone who took fierce pride in maintaining order, even when everything else was chaos. Penny emerged from one of the 2 small bedrooms, carrying a toddler on her hip. Timothy had his mother's eyes and his sister's serious expression. He regarded Dennis and Caleb with solemn curiosity. "Hey, Penny," Dennis said gently. "Hi, Mr. Holbrook. Hi, Caleb." She seemed nervous, protective of her mother, uncertain how this would go. Brenda gestured to the couch. "Sit, please." "Can I get you anything? Water?" "We're fine, thank you." Dennis sat Caleb close beside him. The couch had definitely seen better years, springs protesting under their weight. But it was clean. Brenda settled into the single armchair, and Penny sat on the floor near her mother's feet, still holding Timothy. The defensive posture was clear. Family united against potential judgment. "I appreciate you agreeing to meet with me," Dennis began. "I know this is awkward. Penny told me you've been giving her your lunch." Brenda's voice was tight with controlled emotion. "I want to thank you for that. And I want you to know it won't be necessary anymore. We're handling things." "I'm sure you are." I can see that you're doing everything possible for your kids. Dennis kept his voice gentle, non-judgmental. But I also know how hard it is to do this alone. I've been there. Brenda's eyes narrowed slightly. Have you? My wife died 3 years ago. Cancer. The medical bills destroyed our savings. I lost my construction job because I couldn't work consistent hours. I've stood in grocery stores with a calculator doing math to figure out if I could afford an extra gallon of milk. He paused. I'm a janitor now because it pays less, but lets me be there for my son. So yeah, I've been there. Maybe not exactly where you are, but close enough to understand. Something in Brenda's posture shifted, the defensiveness easing just slightly. I'm not a charity case. I never thought you were. Penny's told me how hard you work. 2 jobs, sometimes 3. You're doing everything right. The system is just rigged against people like us. Then why are you here? The question came out sharp, but Dennis heard the fear underneath it. The fear that he was going to judge her, find her lacking, threaten the fragile dignity she'd managed to maintain. Because I care about your daughter, Dennis said simply. She's a remarkable kid. Smart, kind, resilient. And she's hungry, Brenda. Not just sometimes, often. She's wearing shoes with holes in them and a jacket that won't keep her warm once it really gets cold. I know you know this. I know it's killing you. But there are resources, programs that could help, and I thought maybe we don't take handouts. Brenda's voice cracked slightly. I've been on assistance before. The way people look at you when you use food stamps at the store. The forms you have to fill out, the way they make you prove over and over that you're really struggling. The hoops you have to jump through while people judge you for needing help. She shook her head. I won't do that to my kids. Dennis leaned forward, choosing his words carefully. I understand pride. I really do. But Brenda, those programs exist because good people, people like you, need temporary help sometimes. You pay taxes, right? You're working. You've paid into the system. Using it isn't taking. It's accepting support that you've already contributed to. It feels like failure. It's not failure. Failure would be giving up. You're not giving up. You're working yourself to exhaustion trying to provide. All I'm suggesting is that maybe you don't have to do it completely alone. The silence that followed Dennis's words stretched uncomfortably. Brenda stared at her hands, jaw tight, clearly struggling with emotions she didn't want to show in front of a stranger. Timothy squirmed in Penny's arms, and she adjusted him gently, whispering something that made him settle. Finally, Brenda looked up. You want to know why I work so hard? Why I'd rather go without sleep than accept help? Dennis nodded, staying quiet, letting her find her words. Penny's father. Brenda's voice went flat, emotionless in the way people talk about painful things when they've built walls around the hurt. He was my high school sweetheart. We got married young, had Penny, thought we'd build a life. Then things got hard. Money got tight. He started drinking, then worse. Got mean with it. Penny's arms tightened around her brother, and Dennis noticed how she wouldn't look at her mother during this telling, as if the memories were too close. I left when Penny was 4. Packed what we could carry and moved 3 states away. Started over. Worked my way up to assistant manager at a retail store, had my own apartment, was actually making it work. Brenda's hands twisted together. Then I met someone new. He seemed kind. We had Timothy. 2 weeks after Timothy was born, he emptied my bank account and disappeared. Haven't heard from him since. Dennis felt anger flare in his chest, not at Brenda, but at the men who'd failed these kids, who'd left a good woman struggling alone. Lost the assistant manager position because I couldn't work the hours with a newborn. Lost the better apartment. Had to move here. Brenda gestured around the small space. Now I work 2 jobs that pay half what I used to make, spend money I don't have on childcare, and still can't keep up. The state wants documents I don't have for programs I can't access. Everything's a catch-22. Need money for childcare to work, but need to work to afford childcare. What about family? Dennis asked gently. My parents disowned me when I left my first husband. Said I made vows, should honor them even if he... She glanced at Penny and didn't finish the sentence. His family blames me for him losing his job, losing everything. There's no one. The isolation of it struck Dennis hard. He'd at least had Laura's parents for a while, co-workers who'd helped, a community however thin. Brenda had nothing except her own determination and 2 kids depending on her. Caleb, who'd been quiet this whole time, spoke up suddenly. "My mom died. Dad couldn't work his regular job anymore because he had to take care of me. We had to move to a smaller place too. We eat a lot of pasta." The simple honesty from a 7-year-old shifted something in the room. Brenda's expression softened, and Penny looked at Caleb with surprise and recognition. "I'm sorry about your mom," Brenda said quietly. "I'm sorry about your—" Caleb paused, unsure how to phrase it. "About things being hard." Dennis put his hand on his son's shoulder, proud of this small person with such a big heart. "What Caleb's trying to say, what I'm trying to say, is that we understand. And we're not here to judge or fix everything. We're just here to say, you don't have to do this completely alone." Brenda's eyes filled with tears she clearly didn't want to shed. "I'm so tired," she whispered. "I'm so tired all the time. I work nights cleaning offices, and I sleep maybe 4 hours, then I'm up for the day shift at the store. Penny watches Timothy after school until I get home. She's 8 years old, and she's basically raising her brother because I'm never here." "I don't mind," Penny said quickly. "I love Timothy, but you should be playing with friends, not changing diapers and making bottles." Brenda's voice broke. "You should have new shoes without holes, and a warm coat and a lunchbox with actual food in it every day. You shouldn't have to write me notes saying, 'Don't be mad because there's nothing to pack.'" Dennis watched as Penny got up and moved to her mother, wrapping her free arm around Brenda's shoulders while still holding Timothy. "Mama, it's okay. We're okay. We're not okay, baby. We're surviving, but that's not the same thing." Dennis let them have that moment, let Brenda's walls crumble in the safety of someone who understood. When she'd wiped her eyes and composed herself, he spoke again. "The school has resources. Principal Sheffield is good people. She genuinely cares about the students. There's an emergency fund for families in crisis. It's not welfare, it's not government assistance. It's just the school helping families in their community." "I don't know," Brenda started. "What if I talk to her first?" Dennis suggested. "Feel out what's available, how it works, no commitment. Then you can decide if it's something you want to pursue." Brenda looked at Penny, at Timothy, at the small apartment that couldn't hide their struggle no matter how clean she kept it. "What would you have done?" she asked Dennis. "If someone had offered help when you were at your lowest, would you have taken it?" Dennis thought back to the dark months after Laura died, the pride that had nearly drowned him. "Honestly? Probably not at first. I was too stubborn, too scared of looking weak. But Laura's mother sat me down one day and said something I've never forgotten. She said, 'Accepting help isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It takes more strength to say yes when you need it than to say no and suffer alone.' Your mother-in-law sounds smart." She was. "Still is." Dennis paused. "Let me talk to Sheffield. See what's actually available. No pressure, no forms yet. Just information. Then you decide." Brenda was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Just information. But I'm not promising anything." "Fair enough." As they prepared to leave, something on the small end table caught Dennis's eye, a photograph in a simple frame. It showed a younger Brenda, smiling, holding a toddler Penny. Behind them was a man Dennis assumed was Penny's father. They looked happy, whole, like a family with a future. The contrast between that image and this reality was stark. "That was a long time ago," Brenda said, following his gaze. "Different life. You're still that person," Dennis said gently. "Still the woman who smiles and holds her daughter and dreams of better things. The circumstances changed. You didn't." At the door, Penny gave Dennis a quick hug. "Thank you for coming," she whispered. "Thank you for helping Mama see it's okay. She'll figure it out," Dennis assured her. "She's stronger than she knows." In the car, Caleb was unusually quiet until they were halfway home. "Dad? That little boy, Timothy, he's the same age I was when Mom died." "Yeah, buddy. About the same? Are they going to be okay?" Dennis gripped the steering wheel tighter. "I don't know. But we're going to try our best to help make sure they are." "Good." Caleb stared out the window at the passing streetlights. "Nobody should have to be alone like that." The next morning, Dennis requested a meeting with Principal Sheffield. She agreed immediately, clearing 15 minutes in her chaotic schedule. Her office was exactly what he expected. Organized chaos, files stacked on every surface, a coffee cup that had clearly been refilled multiple times. "Dennis, what can I do for you?" She gestured for him to sit. He explained the situation as carefully as he could, respecting Brenda's privacy while making clear the severity of the need. Sheffield listened without interrupting, her expression growing more concerned as he spoke. "I've noticed, Penny," she said when he finished. "Quiet kid, good grades, keeps to herself. I didn't know things were this difficult at home." She pulled out a folder. "We do have an emergency family assistance fund. It's not huge, but it can help with immediate needs, groceries, clothing, utility bills. We can also expedite applications for the free lunch program if the family qualifies. Her mother's proud," Dennis warned. "She's resistant to anything that feels like charity," Sheffield nodded knowingly. "I've worked with families like this before. The key is framing it correctly, not as charity but as community support. Temporary help while she stabilizes." She made a note. "I'll reach out to her directly. Sometimes hearing it from an official source makes it feel less personal, easier to accept. Thank you. No, thank you. For noticing. For caring enough to get involved." Sheffield looked at him with new respect. "Most people walk past struggle every day and never see it. You saw it and did something." Walking back to his cleaning cart, Dennis felt lighter, despite knowing the hard parts were still ahead. But at least now Brenda wasn't facing it alone. At least now there was a path forward, however uncertain. 3 weeks passed. Principal Sheffield had reached out to Brenda, and slowly, carefully, they'd begun the process of accessing resources. The free lunch program was approved. The emergency fund provided a one-time grocery stipend. Small victories, but victories nonetheless. Penny arrived at school with better lunches now, though she still sought out Dennis during breaks. Their friendship no longer built on hunger, but on genuine connection. Then came a Monday morning in early December that changed everything. Penny didn't come to school. Dennis noticed her absence immediately. The empty desk in Mrs. Brennan's classroom when he cleaned during morning break. The quiet spot at lunch where she usually sat. He told himself not to worry. Kids got sick. Parents had emergencies. It was probably nothing. But Tuesday came, and Penny still wasn't there. Wednesday the same. By Thursday, Dennis's concern had grown into genuine worry. He sought out Mrs. Brennan during her planning period. "Have you heard from Penny's mother?" he asked, trying to keep his tone casual. Mrs. Brennan looked up from her lesson plans, concern creasing her forehead. "No, actually. Usually, parents call or email when there's an extended absence. I've tried reaching the emergency contact number, but it's disconnected." A cold feeling settled in Dennis's stomach. He went straight to Sheffield's office, not bothering to wait for an appointment. "The number we have on file isn't working either," Sheffield confirmed, already pulling up records. "I was going to do a wellness check this afternoon. Want to come with me?" They drove in Sheffield's car to the address Dennis had visited weeks ago. The neighborhood looked different in the grey December light, colder, more desolate. When they climbed the stairs to apartment 2C and knocked, there was no answer. "Mrs. Walker?" Sheffield called through the door. "This is Principal Sheffield from Riverside Elementary. We're concerned about Penny." Silence. Dennis tried knocking again, harder. "Brenda, it's Dennis Holbrook. Are you in there?" The door across the hall opened, and an older woman peered out. "They're gone. Left Friday with bags and boxes. Landlord came by Saturday looking for them." Dennis's heart dropped. "Did she say where they were going?" "Didn't say nothing to me. But I heard her on the phone Thursday night. She was crying, talking about losing the apartment." The neighbor shook her head. "Been 3 months behind on rent, I guess." Landlord finally had enough. Sheffield thanked the woman, and they retreated to her car. Dennis sat in the passenger seat, feeling like he'd been punched. She was evicted. That's why she left. It looks that way. Sheffield was already on her phone making calls. "I'm contacting social services. If they're homeless with 2 minor children, there are emergency shelters, programs." But Dennis barely heard her. His mind was racing through the implications. Penny, who just started to feel stable, who'd finally had enough to eat, who'd been reading those books with such joy, now displaced, uprooted, possibly in a shelter or worse. Brenda, who'd worked so hard to maintain dignity, now facing the ultimate loss of home. Timothy, just a toddler, confused and scared. He thought about that last conversation with Brenda, how tired she'd looked, how she'd admitted they were surviving but not okay. He should have pushed harder, should have done more. Should have. "This isn't your fault," Sheffield said, reading his expression. "You did everything you could, more than most would have done. It wasn't enough. It never feels like enough when the system is this broken." Sheffield's voice was tight with her own frustration. "But Dennis, you gave that family weeks of stability. You helped Penny feel seen and valued. You got them connected to resources. None of that is wasted even now." Dennis wanted to believe her, but all he could think about was Penny's card. "Thank you for seeing me. What good was being seen if he couldn't prevent this?" That evening he told Caleb what had happened. His son's face crumpled in a way that broke Dennis's heart all over again. "Where will they sleep?" Caleb asked. "I don't know, buddy. Maybe a shelter, maybe with friends." "They don't have friends. You said Penny's mom had no family." The stark truth of it hung between them. "I know." Caleb was quiet for a moment, then looked up at his father with an expression far too old for a 7-year-old. "We have the extra bedroom." Dennis had known this was coming, had been wrestling with it himself all afternoon. "It's not that simple, Caleb. There are legal issues, space issues, money issues. Mom would have let them stay." The invocation of Laura's name hit Dennis hard because Caleb was absolutely right. Laura, with her generous heart and practical solutions, would have already made up the extra beds and cleared space in the closet. She would have found a way to make it work, bureaucracy and budget be damned. But Laura had always been braver than Dennis. She'd been the dreamer, remember? The one who saw possibilities where he saw obstacles. And look where dreaming had gotten her. Dead at 32, leaving her husband and son to navigate the world without her optimism to guide them. "Let me think about it," Dennis said finally. "Let me talk to some people. See what's actually possible." Caleb nodded, but his expression said he'd already made up his mind about what the right answer was. Over the next 2 days, Dennis made calls. He spoke with social services, with housing authorities, with Sheffield multiple times. He learned that Brenda and the kids were indeed in emergency shelter, a facility across town that housed multiple families in crowded conditions. He learned there was a wait list for subsidized housing that was months long. He learned that Brenda was trying to work while keeping her kids safe in an environment not designed for safety. He also learned, through quiet conversations with Floyd and research online, what it would take to temporarily house someone else's children. Background checks, home visits, legal documentation. It wasn't impossible, but it wasn't simple either. And there was no guarantee Brenda would even accept the help. Saturday morning, Dennis took Caleb with him to the shelter. It was a grey concrete building in an industrial part of town, surrounded by chain-link fence. Security at the entrance checked their names against a visitor list before letting them through. The inside was worse than Dennis had imagined. Harsh fluorescent lights, the smell of too many people in too little space, the sound of crying children and desperate conversations. A staff member directed them to a common area where families could receive visitors. Penny saw them first. She'd been sitting on a worn couch, reading one of the books Dennis had given her, and her face transformed when she recognized them. She ran over but stopped short of hugging Dennis, suddenly shy or maybe embarrassed to be seen here. "Mr. Holbrook, Caleb." Her voice was small. "Hey, Penny." Dennis crouched down to her level. "I've been worried about you. We're okay. Mama says it's temporary," but her eyes told a different story. They held a new kind of exhaustion, a dimming of the light that had started to shine when things were getting better. This place was breaking something in her day by day. Brenda appeared from around a corner, carrying Timothy. She looked worse than Dennis had ever seen her, hollowed out, defeated in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion. When she saw Dennis and Caleb, shame flooded her face. "You shouldn't have come here," she said quietly. "We wanted to see how you were doing." "You can see." Brenda gestured around the depressing space. This is what happens when you can't keep up. This is what I was trying to avoid. This isn't failure, Brenda. This is a system that failed you. Doesn't feel like there's much difference from where I'm standing. She sat down heavily on the couch, Timothy in her lap. The shelter only allows us to stay 30 days. After that, if we don't have somewhere else to go, they have to turn us out. Make room for the next family in crisis. What about the subsidized housing list? Months away, maybe longer. Brenda's voice was flat, empty of hope. I'm trying to save enough for a deposit on a regular apartment, but shelter rules say I have to be out all day looking for work or housing. Hard to work when you can't afford childcare and can't bring a toddler to job interviews. Dennis looked at Penny, at Timothy, at this exhausted woman who'd tried so hard and gotten nowhere. He thought about his extra bedroom, about Caleb's generous heart, about Laura's voice in his memory, asking him what kind of person he wanted to be. He thought about all the obstacles, the practical concerns, the financial strain, the complexity of bringing someone else's family into his home. All the very reasonable reasons to walk away, to say he'd done enough, to protect his own small household from taking on more struggle. Then he thought about 5 simple words written in careful child's handwriting. Thank you for seeing me. Come stay with us, he said. The words hung in the air between them. Come stay with us. Dennis watched the emotions flicker across Brenda's face. Shock, hope, suspicion, pride, all warring for dominance. Penny had gone completely still, hardly breathing, as if afraid any movement might shatter the moment. You can't be serious, Brenda said finally. I'm completely serious. Dennis kept his voice steady, certain. We have an extra bedroom. It's small, but it's clean and safe. You and the kids can stay there while you get back on your feet. No strings attached, no deadline. Why would you do that? You barely know us, because you need help and I can help. It's that simple. It's not simple at all. Brenda's voice rose slightly, drawing looks from other families in the common area. She lowered it again, but the intensity remained. You're asking me to move my family into a stranger's home, to accept that level of charity. It's not charity. It's just people helping people, the way it should be. Dennis glanced at Penny, who was watching her mother with desperate hope. Look, I know your pride is telling you to say no. Mine would too. But this place, he gestured around the shelter, this isn't safe long term. You know that. And Penny knows that. You're going to run out of time here long before you can save enough for a deposit. Brenda's jaw clenched. She looked at her daughter, at the worn book in Penny's hands, at Timothy who'd started fussing in her arms. Dennis could see the calculation happening, pride weighed against necessity, independence measured against her children's well-being. What about your son? She asked, grasping for objections. This affects him too. Does he even want strangers in his home? Caleb spoke up for the first time. It was my idea first. And you're not strangers. You're Penny and her family. Kid, you're 7 years old. You don't understand what you're asking for. I understand that Penny needs somewhere safe to live, Caleb said with the blunt honesty of childhood. And we have space. Mom always said we should help people when we can. This is helping. Brenda looked like she might cry again, but she held it together. I can't pay rent. Not right away. I'm barely covering the storage unit where I had to put our stuff. I'm not asking for rent, Dennis said. I'm asking you to accept temporary help while you stabilize. Save your money, find a better job, get on the subsidized housing list. When you're ready to move into your own place, you'll go. But until then, you don't have to do this alone. What if it takes months? Then it takes months. Dennis could see Floyd's concerned expression in his mind, could imagine the tight budget getting tighter, the careful calculations becoming even more careful. But he pushed those worries aside. We'll figure it out as we go. Penny couldn't stay quiet any longer. Mama, please. Please say yes. Brenda closed her eyes, and when she opened them they were wet. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Dennis said simply. Say yes and let us help you. It took another 10 minutes of conversation, of Dennis addressing every objection Brenda raised, of Penny's silent pleading finally wearing down her mother's resistance. Finally, Brenda nodded, just once, a small movement that carried enormous weight. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, but just until I can find something better. Just temporary." "Temporary," Dennis agreed, though something in his gut told him this was going to change all their lives in ways none of them could predict. The next week was a whirlwind of logistics. Dennis had to clear space in the extra bedroom, which had been serving as storage and laundry catch-all. Caleb helped enthusiastically, carrying boxes to the basement, making room in the closet. They borrowed an old crib from a neighbor for Timothy and bought a cheap air mattress for Brenda at the discount store. Floyd noticed Dennis's distraction at work. "You're taking on a lot," he observed one afternoon. "I know, just be careful." Good intentions don't always lead to good outcomes. Dennis understood the warning. Bringing 3 people into his household could strain every resource he had, financial, emotional, practical. There were 1,000 ways this could go wrong. But there were also ways it could go right, and sometimes you had to take the risk. Principal Sheffield was more enthusiastic. "This is incredibly generous," she said when Dennis told her. "Let me see what support we can provide. I'll connect Brenda with our school counselor, who has resources for job placement and childcare assistance. She's going to need all the help she can get." "So are you," Sheffield said pointedly. "You're taking on another single parent's full family. That's not small. Don't be afraid to ask for help yourself." On moving day, such as it was, Dennis borrowed a co-worker's truck and drove to the storage unit where Brenda had managed to stash their belongings. There wasn't much. Some clothes in trash bags, a few boxes of dishes and kitchen items, toys for the kids, that framed photograph he'd seen at their old apartment. The material evidence of a life that had been larger once, now compressed into what could fit in a 5x8 storage space. Brenda was quiet during the drive to his apartment, Timothy asleep in her lap, Penny squeezed between her and Caleb in the back seat. Dennis could feel the tension radiating from her, embarrassment mixed with relief, mixed with fear of what accepting this help might mean. "House rules are simple," Dennis said as they unloaded boxes. "Clean up after yourself, contribute what you can, when you can, and communicate. If something's not working, we talk about it. No letting resentments build. That seems fair. And Brenda..." Dennis paused, choosing his words carefully. "You're not a guest here." "Not really? You're family helping family get through hard times. That means you don't have to ask permission for every little thing or tiptoe around. This is your home now too, for however long you need it." Her eyes filled again, and she looked away quickly. "I'm not usually this much of a crier. You're allowed to feel things. God knows you've been holding it together long enough. The first night was awkward. Everyone trying to be too polite, too careful not to intrude on each other's space. Dinner was quiet, with stilted conversation. Timothy fussed in an unfamiliar environment. Penny retreated to the bedroom early with her books. Brenda kept apologizing for every small thing. But the second day was better. Caleb and Penny discovered they both liked the same cartoon and watched it together. Timothy warmed up to Dennis, letting him hold the toddler while Brenda took her first real shower in days. Brenda made dinner, nothing fancy. Just spaghetti with sauce from a jar, but it was the first home-cooked meal Dennis and Caleb had had in weeks. "You don't have to cook," Dennis protested. "I want to contribute something," Brenda said. "Besides, you've been feeding my daughter for months. It's my turn." By the end of the first week, a rhythm was emerging. Brenda would drop Penny at school, then take Timothy to the free childcare program Sheffield had connected her with. She'd spend the day job hunting or working part-time shifts at a new retail position she'd found. Dennis would see Penny in the hallways at school, and they'd exchange waves, but the desperate neediness was gone now. She had lunches, had stability, had a home to return to. Evenings became communal. The kids would do homework together at the kitchen table while Dennis made dinner or Brenda cleaned up. Timothy's toys gradually spread through the living room. Brenda's clothes appeared in the shared laundry basket. The bathroom medicine cabinet held 2 families' worth of toothbrushes. It wasn't perfect. The apartment felt crowded, money was tighter than ever, and there were moments of friction, disagreements about discipline or cleaning standards or whose turn it was for the bathroom. But there was also laughter. Timothy's giggles when Caleb made funny faces. Penny's excitement when she finished a new book. Brenda's rare smiles when a job interview went well. One evening, about 3 weeks in, Dennis was cleaning up after dinner when Brenda joined him at the sink with a dish towel. "I got the call today," she said quietly. "That job I interviewed for at the medical office, they're offering me a position. Full-time benefits, actual career track work. Brenda, that's amazing. It means I can start saving properly. Put money away for first and last month's rent somewhere." She dried a plate carefully. "I'll be able to move out eventually. Get my kids back into our own space." Dennis nodded, feeling something complicated twist in his chest. This was the goal, wasn't it? Get Brenda stable enough to stand on her own again. But the thought of Penny leaving, of this makeshift family dissolving, felt sadder than he'd expected. "There's no rush," he said. "Save what you need to save. Make sure you're really stable before you go. I know. But I need you to understand. I will go, eventually. This can't be permanent." "I understand." But later that night, lying in bed, Dennis wondered if he really did understand. Somewhere in the chaos of the past month, these strangers had stopped being charity cases and started being family. Penny's laugh in the next room, Timothy's babbling, Brenda's presence making the apartment feel more like a home than it had since Laura died. All of it had woven itself into the fabric of their daily life. Caleb had said it best a few days earlier. In the unconscious way children speak truth. He'd been coloring with Penny at the table, and he'd looked up at Dennis and said, "Our family got bigger, didn't it, Dad?" Yes, Dennis had thought. It did, and now, in the darkness of his room, he let himself acknowledge a truth he'd been avoiding. He didn't want them to leave. Not because he was a martyr, or because Brenda needed him, but because somewhere along the way, he'd needed them too. Needed to feel useful beyond just surviving. Needed to be part of something bigger than just him and Caleb against the world. Needed to prove that good people helping each other could make a real difference. But Brenda would leave eventually. She had to, for her pride, for her independence, to prove she could provide for her kids on her own. And Dennis would let her go, because that was the right thing to do, even if it broke something in the process. For now, though, they had this. 5 people sharing a small apartment, sharing meals and bills and bathroom time, and the complicated, beautiful work of building something like family from the pieces of their separate struggles. It wouldn't last forever, but it didn't have to. Sometimes temporary was enough. 2 months into their arrangement, Dennis came home from work to find Brenda sitting at the kitchen table, papers spread in front of her, tears streaming down her face. His heart seized. Something had gone wrong, the job had fallen through, another crisis was unfolding. What happened? He asked, dropping his keys and moving toward her. But Brenda was smiling through her tears, and she held up a letter with shaking hands. "I got approved. For the subsidized housing. There's an apartment available, a 2-bedroom in a safe neighborhood, rent I can actually afford. They want me to come see it tomorrow." Dennis felt joy and loss collide in his chest. "Brenda, that's incredible. That's exactly what you've been working toward." I know. She wiped at her eyes, laughing at herself. "I'm crying like an idiot when this is good news. The best news." Penny appeared from the bedroom she shared with Caleb and Timothy, having heard her mother's voice. "Mama, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, baby. We got our own place. A real apartment just for us." Penny's face lit up, then immediately clouded with confusion. "But what about here? What about Mr. Holbrook and Caleb?" The question hung heavy in the room. What about here? What about the makeshift family they'd built, the routines they'd established, the way they'd learned to fit their lives together? "We'll still see each other," Dennis said, though his voice felt tight. "You'll still go to Riverside. I'll still see you at school. But it won't be the same," Penny said quietly, with the brutal honesty of an 8-year-old who understood more than adults wanted her to. "No," Dennis thought, "it won't be." Over the next week, preparations began. Brenda went to see the apartment and came back glowing. It was small but clean, in a complex with a playground, near a bus line that would get her to work. The rent was manageable with her new job. She could finally provide for her children in a space that was theirs. Dennis helped her budget for the move, for the deposits and fees, for the furniture they'd need. Principal Sheffield connected them with a church donation program that could provide basics. Floyd offered to borrow his brother's truck for moving day, but something was shifting in the apartment, a melancholy settling over what should have been pure celebration. Caleb had grown quiet. Penny oscillated between excitement and sadness. Timothy, too young to understand, sensed the tension and became clingy. 3 nights before the move, Caleb spoke what had been building. "I don't want them to go." Dennis sat on the edge of his son's bed. "I know, buddy. I don't either. But this is what Brenda's been working toward. Her own place, her independence. It's a good thing. Then why does it feel bad? Because good things can still be sad. Because we care about them, and we'll miss having them here." Dennis smoothed Caleb's hair back. "But they're not disappearing. We'll still see them. It's not the same as being family." "No," Dennis admitted. "It's not." Caleb was quiet, then said, "Mom used to say that family isn't just blood. It's who you choose to keep close." The words hit Dennis hard. Laura had said that often. She was right. "And we chose them. We'll keep choosing them even when they're not living here." The night before moving day, Brenda made a special dinner. Nothing fancy, but more effort than usual. They ate together at the small table, conversation flowing easily despite the sadness underneath. After the kids were in bed, Dennis and Brenda found themselves alone in the living room, each nursing a cup of tea. "I don't know how to thank you," Brenda said finally, "for everything. Taking us in when we had nowhere else to go, never making us feel like burdens. You don't need to thank me." "Yes, I do. You saved us, Dennis, not just from the shelter, but from losing hope, from believing we were worth saving." Dennis shook his head. "You saved yourselves. I just provided a place to land while you did the hard work. Don't diminish what you did." Brenda's voice was firm. "You could have walked away, but you kept showing up. You kept caring. You opened your home to strangers and treated us like family. That matters. I'm scared," Brenda admitted quietly. "What if I can't make it work?" "Then you'll handle it. You're stronger than you think. You've survived things that would have broken other people." Dennis leaned forward. "And if you can't, then we'll figure something out. You're not alone anymore." Moving day arrived cold and clear. Floyd showed up early with the borrowed truck, and several staff members from Riverside came to help. The donated furniture had already been delivered to the new apartment. Now they were moving the personal belongings. The new apartment was 20 minutes across town. When they arrived, Dennis could see why Brenda had been so excited. It was modest but maintained, with the playground visible from the window. The neighborhood felt safe, stable. The adults worked steadily, carrying boxes, arranging furniture. As the afternoon wore on and the apartment took shape, Dennis watched Brenda's face transform. The fear was still there, but underneath was pride. Pride in having her own space again, in being able to provide this for her children. By evening, the truck was empty and the apartment was set up. The helpers filtered out with goodbyes. Soon, it was just the 2 families standing in Brenda's new living room, facing what came next. "I guess this is it," Brenda said, her voice catching. Penny wrapped her arms around Caleb, and both kids held on tight. The kids finally pulled apart, both wiping at eyes that had gone suspiciously bright. Timothy, sensing the emotional weight in the room, reached up for Penny, who scooped him onto her hip with practiced ease. "Thank you," Penny said to Dennis, her voice small but clear. "Thank you for everything." Dennis crouched down to her level, his own throat tight. "You don't need to thank me, Penny. You know that. I do, though. You saw me when I was invisible. You helped me when nobody else did." She paused, then added with the wisdom that had always made her seem older than her years. "You taught me that asking for help isn't weakness. That's the most important thing anyone ever taught me." Dennis pulled her into a hug, this remarkable child who'd started as a stranger with an empty lunchbox and become something like a daughter. "You're going to do amazing things, Penny. I know it." Caleb was trying very hard not to cry, his face scrunched with the effort. "Can we still have play dates?" "Of course," Brenda said quickly. "Every week if your dad says it's okay. You're welcome here any time. And you're welcome at our place," Dennis added. "All of you. This doesn't have to be goodbye. It's just different now. But they all knew it was goodbye to something precious. Goodbye to the makeshift family unit, to the shared dinners and communal bathroom schedules, and Timothy's toys scattered through the living room. Goodbye to the feeling of not being alone, to the support that came from literally sharing the same space. Floyd cleared his throat from where he'd been waiting by the door. "Truck needs to go back tonight, Dennis. It was time." Dennis straightened, looked at Brenda, saw her fighting the same emotions he was struggling with. For a moment, he wanted to tell her to forget this, to come back with them, to keep what they'd built. But that wasn't fair to her. She'd earned this, her independence, her own home, her right to stand on her own feet. "You have my number," he said. "You call if you need anything. Day or night doesn't matter. I will." Brenda's voice was steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "And Dennis," she paused, seeming to gather courage, "what you did for us, opening your home, treating us like family when we had nothing, I'll never forget it. And someday, when I'm in a position to help someone else, I'm going to pay it forward. I'm going to be for someone else what you were for us." The promise hung in the air between them, sacred and sincere. That was the real gift, Dennis realized. Not just helping one family, but planting seeds of generosity that would grow beyond this moment, beyond these people. Brenda would help someone else someday, and maybe that person would help another. And on, until the kindness multiplied into something bigger than any of them could imagine. "That's all I could ask for," Dennis said quietly. One more round of hugs, Caleb holding. Penny like she might disappear if he let go. Dennis ruffling Timothy's hair, Brenda squeezing Dennis's hand in wordless gratitude. Then they were walking out down the stairs into the February cold that felt sharper than it should. In the truck, Caleb was silent for a long time before speaking. "It hurts, I know, buddy. Is it supposed to hurt this much when you do something good?" Dennis thought about how to answer that, about the complex truth that sometimes doing the right thing meant letting go, that love sometimes meant giving people space to grow, even when you wanted to keep them close. Sometimes the best things hurt because they matter, because we cared. And caring always risks hurting. Would you do it again, knowing it would hurt like this? "In a heartbeat," Dennis said without hesitation. Every single time. The apartment felt cavernously empty when they got home. Rooms that had been crowded with people and noise and life were suddenly too quiet. Penny's books were gone from the shelf. Timothy's toys were missing from the corner. The bathroom counter had half as many toothbrushes. The refrigerator, when Dennis opened it, had space again, but that space felt like absence rather than convenience. They went through the motions of their old evening routine, but it felt wrong now. Dinner for 2 instead of 5. Homework without Penny working alongside Caleb. Bedtime without Timothy's bath time giggles echoing from the bathroom. When Dennis tucked Caleb in, his son looked up at him with red-rimmed eyes. "Are we back to just us now?" The question broke Dennis's heart. "We're back to our immediate family, yes. But Penny and Brenda and Timothy, they're still part of our lives. They're chosen family now. That doesn't go away just because they don't live here. Promise. Promise." But alone in his own room later, Dennis wasn't sure he believed it. Life had a way of creating distance, of letting relationships fade when they weren't maintained by proximity. Good intentions and promises could only fight against entropy for so long. He hoped, God, he hoped, that they'd keep their connection strong. But he also knew how easy it would be for weeks to turn into months, for occasional visits to become rare ones, but chosen family to drift back into the category of people you used to know. He pulled out his wallet and looked at the crumpled note he still carried. "Don't be mad. Mama tried. She said food is for tomorrow." The words that had started everything, that had opened his eyes and his heart to a little girl's struggle. He'd kept it as a reminder of what was possible when you chose to see people, when you decided to care. The next morning at school felt strange. Dennis did his rounds as always, but when he passed Penny's classroom, she was there, sitting at her desk, unpacking her backpack, looking tired but okay. When she saw him through the window, her face lit up and she waved enthusiastically. He waved back, relief flooding through him. She was here. They hadn't disappeared into some void. They were still connected, still part of each other's lives, even if the daily proximity was gone. At lunch, Penny found him in the hallway. "Mr. Holbrook, guess what? I have a real lunch today that Mama packed. Turkey sandwich, apple, and she even put in cookies. Real cookies from the store." "That's wonderful, Penny, and our apartment is so nice. I have my own room, well, I share with Timothy, but it's ours. And there's a playground outside." Her enthusiasm was genuine, uncomplicated by the sadness of yesterday. Kids were resilient like that, able to move forward while still holding on to what mattered. "I'm so happy for you. Can Caleb come over this weekend? Mama said I should ask." "I think we can arrange that." As she ran off to join her classmates, Dennis felt something settle in his chest. Maybe this would be okay. Maybe chosen family could survive the transition from living together to living apart. Maybe the bonds they'd built were stronger than distance or daily routine. That evening, his phone rang. Brenda's name on the screen. "Everything okay?" He answered immediately, worry spiking. "Everything's fine." "Better than fine." She sounded breathless, happy. I wanted to call and say thank you again. For everything. We had our first real dinner in our own place tonight. Timothy ate actual vegetables because we had them in the fridge. Penny's already made friends with a girl in the building. And I realized, this is because of you. All of this is because of you, Brenda. You did the work. We did the work. Together. She paused, then added, "Sunday dinner? At our place. I want to cook for you and Caleb. A proper thank you." Dennis smiled, the tightness in his chest easing further. "We'd love that. Good, bring an appetite. I'm making my grandmother's pot roast recipe. Fair warning, I haven't made it in years, so no promises on quality. I'm sure it'll be perfect." After they hung up, Dennis sat for a moment in the quiet apartment. Caleb was in his room, probably reading. The radiator hissed its familiar song. Outside, winter continued its slow transition towards spring. They hadn't lost each other. The shape of their relationship had changed, but the connection remained. Sunday dinners would become tradition. Playdates would continue. They'd celebrate birthdays and holidays together. They'd be there for each other in the ways that mattered. And maybe, Dennis thought, that was the real lesson in all of this. Family wasn't about living under the same roof or sharing the same last name. It wasn't about obligation or blood ties. It was about showing up. It was about seeing each other and choosing every day to care. He'd seen Penny when she was invisible. She'd seen him when he was just the janitor nobody noticed. They'd all seen each other, really seen each other, and decided they were worth the effort of connection. That was family. That was what lasted. 3 months later, spring was finally making its presence known. The trees around Riverside Elementary were budding green, and the playground was full of kids who'd shed their heavy winter coats for lighter jackets. Dennis pushed his cleaning cart down the hallway, the familiar rhythm of his work now carrying different meaning than it had 6 months ago. He still packed 2 lunches every morning, but now both were for him and Caleb. Penny had her own lunches, packed by a mother who could afford to fill them properly. But their connection hadn't faded. If anything, it had deepened into something more sustainable. Every Sunday, without fail, they had dinner together. Sometimes at Brenda's apartment, sometimes at Dennis's. The kids would play while the adults cooked, and they'd sit around a table talking about their weeks, their struggles, their small victories. Brenda had been promoted at the medical office, from receptionist to office coordinator, a position with better pay and real growth potential. She was saving money steadily now, building the kind of financial cushion that meant security rather than just survival. The apartment that had seemed like such a victory in February was already feeling small, and she'd mentioned looking at 3-bedroom places once her lease was up. A room for her, one for Penny, one for Timothy as he grew older. Moving up in the world, she'd said with pride that was entirely earned. Penny had blossomed over these months. She'd made a best friend named Zoe, just as she'd mentioned back when Dennis first started helping her. She joined the school's reading club and consistently scored at the top of her class. Mrs. Brennan pulled Dennis aside one day to tell him that Penny was one of the brightest students she'd ever taught, and she was recommending her for the gifted program next year. "Whatever you did," Mrs. Brennan had said. Not knowing the full story, it made all the difference for that child, but it wasn't just what Dennis had done. It was what they'd all done, the community that had formed around one family's struggle. Principal Sheffield had used Brenda's story, with permission, to establish a more robust family assistance program at Riverside. There was now an emergency fund that helped multiple families each year, a food pantry stocked by donations, connections to resources that helped parents before they reached crisis point. "You started something important," Sheffield had told Dennis. "One act of kindness that rippled out and changed how we support our families." Floyd had been right to warn him that good intentions didn't always lead to good outcomes. But sometimes, when you were lucky and committed and surrounded by decent people, they did. Sometimes one person noticing one child's empty lunchbox could spark a chain reaction of compassion that helped dozens of families. On this particular spring afternoon, Dennis was cleaning up after lunch when he noticed something that made him pause. A boy from the 4th grade, he thought the name was Tyler, sitting alone in an empty classroom, staring at his unopened lunchbox with that same defeated posture Dennis had seen in Penny months ago. For a moment, he considered walking past. He'd done his part, hadn't he? Helped one family, started a program, made a difference. Surely that was enough. He had his own life to manage, his own son to care for. He couldn't save every kid who went hungry, but even as the thoughts formed, he knew he wasn't going to walk past. Because that's not who he was anymore. Penny had changed him, not just by letting him help her, but by teaching him that seeing people and caring about them was its own reward. Regardless of the cost or complication, Dennis knocked gently on the classroom door. "Hey there, you doing okay?" The boy looked up, startled, then shrugged. "Mind if I come in for a second?" Dennis didn't wait for permission, just pushed his cleaning cart inside and sat down at a nearby desk, making himself non-threatening available. "What's your name?" "Tyler. I'm Mr. Holbrook. I work here, keep things clean." Dennis gestured toward the lunchbox. "You planning to eat that?" Tyler's hands moved to the lunchbox, then stopped. The hesitation was telling. Dennis had seen this before. He knew what it meant. "Tell you what," Dennis said quietly. "I packed extra today. Happens a lot. I always make too much. Would you help me out by taking some of it? Hate to waste good food." Tyler's eyes filled with wary hope, the same expression Penny had worn that first day. "Really?" "Really." Dennis pulled out his lunch bag, set it on the desk between them. "Go ahead." As Tyler ate with the careful speed of someone who didn't know when the next meal might come, Dennis made a mental note to talk to Sheffield, to check if Tyler's family was already connected with resources, to make sure this kid didn't slip through the cracks the way Penny almost had. Later that evening, Dennis told Caleb and Brenda about Tyler over Sunday dinner at Brenda's apartment. Penny was helping Timothy build a tower with blocks in the corner, their laughter punctuating the adult conversation. "Here we go again," Brenda said, but she was smiling. "You're going to adopt half the school at this rate." "Not adopt. Just notice, help where I can." Dennis shrugged. "It's not much." "It's everything," Brenda corrected. "To that kid, it's everything. Just like it was everything to Penny." Penny looked up at her name, abandoning the blocks to join them at the table. "Are you helping another kid like you helped me?" "Trying to," she nodded seriously. "Good. Everyone deserves to be seen." She paused, then pulled something from her pocket, a drawing she'd made, carefully folded. She unfolded it and smoothed it on the table. It showed several people holding hands in a circle. Each figure was labeled Mama, Penny, Timothy, Mr. Holbrook, Caleb. Underneath, in her careful printing, she'd written, "My family." "I made this to show at school," she explained. "For Family Week, Mrs. Brennan said we should draw our families, and this is mine." All of it. Dennis felt his throat tighten as he looked at the drawing. This was what mattered. Not the shared address or the legal definitions, but this, chosen family, deliberately built from kindness and need and mutual care. "Can I keep this?" he asked. Penny nodded. "I made it for you. To remember that family isn't just who you live with. It's who sees you, Later, driving home with Caleb, Dennis thought about the journey that had brought them here. It had started with grief, Laura's death, leaving a hole that had seemed impossible to fill. It had continued through struggle, the financial strain, the loneliness, the daily challenge of being everything his son needed. And then, one rainy afternoon, he'd noticed a little girl with an empty lunchbox, and everything had changed. He hadn't saved Penny. If anything, they'd saved each other, her presence in his life giving him purpose beyond mere survival, his help giving her stability that allowed her natural brightness to shine. And in the process, they'd built something bigger than either of them, a chosen family bound not by blood, but by the decision to show up for each other, to care when caring was costly, to see each other truly and completely. "Dad," Caleb's voice broke into his thoughts. "Do you still miss Mom?" "Every day, buddy. Every single day. Do you think she'd be proud of us? Of what we did for Penny and her family?" Dennis thought about Laura, about her generous heart and her belief that people should help each other, about the way she'd always seen possibilities where others saw only obstacles. "Yeah, son. I think she'd be very proud. I think she'd say we honored her memory by living the way she taught us to live, with open hearts and open hands." Caleb nodded, satisfied. "I think so too." When they got home, Dennis carefully placed Penny's drawing on the refrigerator, securing it with magnets. The crayon figures holding hands, the label that declared them family, the simple truth that love wasn't about biology or proximity, but about choice and commitment. He thought about Tyler, about the conversation he'd have with Sheffield tomorrow, about the process of helping another family find their footing. He thought about the emergency fund that now helped multiple families, about the ripple effect of one act of kindness expanding outward to touch lives he'd never even meet. Most of all, he thought about the crumpled note still in his wallet. "Don't be mad. Mama tried. She said food is for tomorrow," and how those words had broken something open in him. How they'd cracked through the walls he'd built around his grief and his struggle, and shown him that pain shared could become purpose, that seeing another person's suffering and choosing to care could transform both their lives. Some moments break your heart, Dennis had learned. But if you're brave enough to let them, they also break it open, making room for more love than you ever imagined possible, making space for chosen family, for unexpected connections, for the kind of purpose that comes not from grand gestures, but from showing up day after day with an extra sandwich and an open heart. The next morning, Dennis packed 3 lunches, one for Caleb, one for himself, and one for Tyler. It wasn't much, just sandwiches and fruit and granola bars, but he knew now that sometimes the smallest acts carried the greatest weight. Sometimes a full lunchbox meant more than food. It meant being seen. It meant someone cared. It meant you weren't alone, and that, Dennis had learned, was everything. He walked Caleb to school as always, those precious 10 minutes of just the two of them. At the entrance, they ran into Penny and Brenda, walking Timothy to the daycare center next door. The 4 of them stood together for a moment, morning sun warming them, 2 families who'd found each other in struggle and built something lasting from the pieces. "See you Sunday?" Brenda asked. "Wouldn't miss it," Dennis replied. Penny hugged Caleb, then Dennis. "Have a good day, Mr. Holbrook. You too, Penny." He watched them walk away, Brenda holding Timothy's hand, Penny skipping alongside them, a family whole and healing. Then he watched Caleb join the stream of students heading inside, his son waving once before disappearing through the doors. Dennis stood there a moment longer, feeling the morning air, seeing the ordinary miracle of another day beginning. Then he headed to the staff entrance, ready to begin his rounds, ready to notice who needed noticing, ready to see who needed seeing, because that was his purpose now. Not just to clean floors and empty trash cans, but to be present, to pay attention, to recognize that every person, child or adult, struggling or stable, deserved to be seen truly and completely. Some moments change everything. The empty lunchbox had been his moment, the catalyst that transformed him from a man merely surviving into someone living with intention and purpose. And the ripples from that moment continued to spread, touching lives in ways he'd never fully know. creating connections that would extend far beyond this school. This season, this story, Dennis Holbrook, janitor at Riverside Elementary, walked into the building with his head up and his heart open, carrying an extra lunch and the knowledge that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply show up and care. And that was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything.